Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Hello.
This time, we're going to be tackling the reigns of Robert I and David II of Scotland.
Two kings,
Yeah,
one nation fighting for survival.
definitely.
Yeah.
And I got to say, you've given me quite the stack of sources to work through this time.
Oh, yeah.
We've got medieval chronicles like the Cron, Fordun, Cron, Laner Cost, even got a little bit from Scala Chronica in
It's a
there.
good mix.
Exchequer rolls detailing all the financial stuff,
Right.
parliamentary records that show all the political struggles that were going on,
Hmm?
plus land grants, royal decrees, really the whole shebang.
Yeah, the works.
So, what do you think are the most important things that we should be looking for as we dive into all of this? I mean, these are turbulent times in Scottish history.
Yeah, it's easy to kind of get lost in all the details of all this.
Right.
But I think the key here is to understand how these sources that we've got reveal the challenges of maintaining independence
Okay.
in the face of English ambition.
Yeah.
So we're going to see that constant push and pull,
Right.
the strategic maneuvering,
Mm-hmm.
the sheer grit it took for Scotland to forge its own path.
Okay, so we're not just listing kings and battles.
Yeah.
We're really looking at how a nation had to fight to define itself against the odds.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, starting our deep dive with Robert I's victory at Bannockburn in 1314,
Oh, yeah.
as described in Cron, Fordun,
It's a good one.
feels pretty epic.
Yeah.
This monumental clash, rivers running red with blood, the English on the run.
Yeah, it's a...
Robert comes across as a tactical genius in this.
Oh, absolutely.
But how did this victory really shape what came after?
Right.
Did it really solve all of Scotland's problems?
Well, no, it didn't actually. And that's the thing.
Okay.
Bannockburn was a turning point. There's no doubt.
Right.
But if we look closer,
Yeah.
the sources, especially the financial records, tell a very different story.
Okay.
Robert had to make concessions. Like that massive payment of 30,000 marks to England in 1328.
30,000 marks.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Was that truly just for damages as Cron Fordun claims?
Right.
Or is Robert kind of playing a deeper game here?
Potentially, yeah.
I mean, securing peace, even at a steep price,
Mm-hmm.
could have been crucial for allowing Scotland to rebuild.
Well, it's possible he was buying time
Okay.
and consolidating his power.
Right.
Because remember, even with the English seemingly subdued after this,
Yeah.
Roger still faced threats from within his own ranks.
Okay.
The Black Parliament of 1320, as Cron Fordun calls it,
Mm-hmm.
was essentially a showdown
Okay.
with a conspiracy against his rule.
So Robert I mean, wasn't he known for being a shrewd politician as much as a warrior?
Yeah, he was.
Could this whole conspiracy have been an opportunity for him to kind of eliminate rivals and further solidify his grip on power?
It's certainly a possibility.
Okay.
You know, this episode reveals that even a king like Robert,
Yeah.
fresh off a major victory like Bannockburn,
Mm.
couldn't rest easy.
Mm-hmm.
Maintaining power required constant vigilance
Right.
and, navigating these internal rivalries that could be just as dangerous as any English army.
So even the hero of Bannockburn had to play the Game of Thrones, so to speak,
He did.
which makes you wonder what happens when that powerful figure's gone.
Right.
Robert I dies in 1329,
Mm-hmm.
and he leaves his young son, David II, to inherit the throne
Right. At 5 years old.
at 5 years old.
Yeah, it's a tough gig.
Cron, Lanarcost, mentions that David was sent to France for safety almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
What does that tell us about the state of Scotland at this point?
Well, it speaks volumes about the precariousness of their situation.
Okay.
Sending the heir apparent into exile
Right.
really highlights that constant threat from England
Mm-hmm.
and the need for powerful allies.
Okay.
And this is where the old alliance with France comes into play.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a symbolic gesture.
Right.
It was a lifeline for the Scottish crown.
So this alliance wasn't just about shared enemies.
No.
It was about ensuring the survival of the Scottish monarchy itself.
Yeah, that's right.
But even with David II tucked away safely in France, Scotland's troubles were far from over.
That's true.
We have the arrival of Edward Balliol,
Oh, yes.
son of the deposed John Balliol,
Yep.
and he's staking his own claim to the Scotland throne
Mm-hmm.
with the backing of, you guessed it, the English.
Of course.
So the English saw an opportunity to exploit this whole situation.
Right.
A young king in exile,
Yeah.
a kingdom in potential turmoil.
Yeah.
Backing Balliol's claim was a way for them to install a puppet ruler.
Yeah. essentially.
and exert control over Scotland. It's a
Well,
classic power play.
it is.
And this sets the stage for the Battle of Dublin Moor in 1332.
Oh, yes.
Now, Forden paints a pretty grim picture of this battle.
Mm.
A devastating defeat for the Scots.
Yes.
It completely upends the hard-won stability of Robert I's reign. It seems like Scotland was constantly being pulled back into this chaos. What was the long-term impact of this loss?
Well, Dublin Moor gave the English a foothold back in Scotland
Okay.
and really emboldened those who supported Balliol.
Right.
And remember,
Yeah.
Balliol, desperate to maintain his shaky grasp on power,
Okay.
went as far as granting 5 Scottish counties to England in 1334.
5 counties.
That's a lot.
That's a huge chunk of territory.
It is.
What was he thinking? It seems like selling out your country to stay in power.
Yeah, it does a bit,
Yeah.
but you have to consider Balliol's actions really highlight the internal divisions that were going on within Scotland.
Okay.
Some nobles saw him as a legitimate king.
Right.
Others were simply opportunistic,
Mm-hmm.
looking to gain advantage amidst the chaos.
Right.
And this fragmentation
Yeah.
really made it even harder to resist English influence.
It's almost Shakespearean.
It is.
The kingdom divided against itself,
Yeah.
struggling to survive both external threats and internal betrayals.
That's right.
And speaking of betrayals, we have the story of Alexander Ramsay,
Oh, yes.
who captures Roxburgh Castle for David II,
Mm-hmm.
only to be imprisoned by William Douglas in 1342.
It's a wild story.
What was the reason for this? This is a shocking betrayal.
It is, and Verdun doesn't really give us clear answers.
Okay.
But this incident, I think, really underscores the complex web of allegiances
Right.
and personal vendettas
Yeah.
that often overshadow the fight for independence.
Right.
So these internal conflicts could be just as damaging as any battle.
So we've got a young king in exile,
Mm-hmm.
a rival claimant backed by the English internal power struggles.
Yeah.
You have to wonder, was there ever a moment for Scotland to breathe? Did they have any chance at lasting peace and stability?
It seems they were always facing an uphill battle,
Yeah.
and things take an even darker turn in 1346.
Okay.
While England's embroiled in the Hundred Years' War with France, David II makes this really bold decision to invade. He likely saw it as an opportunity to exploit English weakness,
Yeah, makes sense.
but the result was a disaster.
The Battle of Durham, another vividly described clash in Cron, ends with David II himself captured and taken prisoner to England,
Yeah,
11 years in captivity.
it's a long time.
Talk about a major setback.
It is.
What did this mean for Scotland's future?
Yeah.
Was this the moment that their hopes for true independence were dashed?
Well, it was a crushing blow, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
But we have to remember the resilience of the Scottish people.
Right.
Even in the face of these seemingly insurmountable odds,
Mm,
they found ways to resist,
okay.
to adapt,
Yeah.
to keep the flame of their nationhood burning.
Okay, I'm sensing a pattern here.
What's that?
Kings facing these impossible choices.
Mm-hmm.
Internal divisions, external pressures,
Yeah,
and through it all, the everyday people caught in the middle.
that's right. And to really understand their experience, I think we need to kind of shift our focus from the battlefield
Okay.
to the daily realities of life in 14th century Scotland.
Okay.
This is where sources like the Exchequer Rolls become so incredibly valuable.
All right.
They give us these glimpses into how people coped,
Mm-hmm.
how the economy functioned,
Right.
and the impact of these just tumultuous events in their lives.
Okay, so let's take a closer look at those Exchequer rolls.
Right.
What kind of details can they reveal about life in medieval Scotland,
Sure.
beyond the grand narratives of kings and battles?
Well, we can learn about everything from the price of salmon in Aberdeen
Wait, the price of salmon?
to the financial strain of war on local communities.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Okay,
Salmon prices.
let's do it.
All right.
The Exchequer Rolls are full of these little details that really bring history to life.
Okay,
So let's dive in and see what they can tell us about life beyond the battlefield.
I'm ready.
Right.
All right, salmon prices in medieval Aberdeen.
Yeah.
Sounds random,
It does.
but I'm guessing it's more significant than it seems.
Yeah, then it appears on the surface.
What can something like that tell us about the bigger picture?
Well, it's a window, I think, into the economic realities
Okay.
of the time.
Right.
These Exchequer Rolls from 1340, for example, don't just list the expenses.
Mm-hmm.
They actually reveal how war
Okay.
impacted daily life.
Yeah.
Aberdeen's accounts show the strain of supporting the war effort,
Right.
a situation that was likely mirrored across Scotland.
So we're seeing the ripple effect of these grand conflicts on the local community.
Exactly.
It's not just armies clashing, it's economies being disrupted, resources stretched thin, and everyday people feeling the pressure.
That's right.
Yeah.
And speaking of pressure,
Yeah.
the parliamentary records from 1366
Okay.
offer another fascinating glimpse into these challenges.
Okay.
David II is back from captivity, but that 11-year absence comes with a hefty price tag.
Yeah, his ransom.
Yeah, the ransom, exactly.
Yeah.
The records detail these council meetings
Okay.
where they're grappling with how to raise the funds
Right.
without pushing the Scottish people to the breaking point.
I mean, imagine being a Scottish peasant at this time,
Yeah.
years of war, maybe even the plague, and now you're being asked to dig deeper to pay for the king's release.
Right.
I can see why they were walking a tightrope here.
Oh, yeah.
What were some of the key issues that they were debating in these meetings?
Well, it wasn't just about the money,
Okay.
though that was a major concern.
Right.
They were also wrestling with the potential consequences
Okay.
of not paying.
Of not paying. Okay.
Could they risk leaving David II in English hands?
Right.
What impact would that have on their hard-fought independence?
Yeah.
The records even hinted discussions about a Scottish king
Okay.
swearing allegiance to an English king,
Wow.
a prospect that clearly filled them with dread.
That's a powerful detail.
It is.
It shows just how deep that fear of English dominance ran. Independence wasn't just about territory or a crown.
Right.
It was about preserving a distinct Scottish identity.
Absolutely.
And that fight for identity played out on a larger stage as well.
It did.
The old alliance with France, which we talked about a little earlier, was critical for Scotland's survival.
Yeah.
But how exactly did this alliance work?
Right.
What were the benefits and what were the risks?
Yeah, it's a good question.
I'm curious about that too.
So,
We know it was forged against a common enemy,
right.
but what were the specific terms? Was it purely military or did it extend to other areas?
Right.
Like trade or cultural exchange?
Well, the old alliance wasn't just a pact of convenience.
Okay.
It reflected a deeper connection between the two nations.
Okay.
While the military aspect was key,
Yeah.
it also fostered cultural exchange
Okay.
and influenced Scotland's relationships with other European powers as well.
Interesting.
And it's important to note, I think, that alliances in this period
Yeah.
weren't always about cold, hard strategy.
Okay.
Shared cultural ties, a sense of kinship, could play a really significant role.
I see.
It's a reminder that international relations back then, just like today,
Right.
were this complex mix
Yeah.
of pragmatism and shared interests.
So we're seeing that Scotland wasn't just passively resisting English pressure.
No.
They were actively shaping their destiny through these strategic alliances and diplomatic maneuvering.
Absolutely.
And it makes you wonder, if England hadn't been so preoccupied with France during the 100 Years' War, would Scotland have had any chance at lasting independence?
Right.
Or were they destined to be caught in the crossfire of these larger conflicts?
A good question.
It really highlights how interconnected history is.
It does.
Events on one side of the continent could have major implications for the other.
Yeah.
We can't rewind time.
No.
But these what-if scenarios, I think, can help us understand the complexities of those choices and consequences.
It's true.
And speaking of complexities,
Yeah.
I have to bring up that detail you mentioned earlier.
Oh.
The chicken pestilence described in Fordoun.
Oh, yeah.
What was that all about?
That was a weird one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a small detail, really.
Okay.
Nestled in the midst of accounts of battles and political intrigue.
Right.
But it caught my eye because it speaks to those realities of everyday life.
Right.
Here we have this strange disease afflicting chickens in 1344. And people are so disgusted they won't even look at them.
That's wild.
Imagine the impact on people's diets,
Yeah.
their livelihoods,
Right.
even their sense of normalcy.
Right.
It's a reminder that history isn't just about these grand events. It's about the lived experiences of ordinary people.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
And it brings to mind something you said earlier
Okay.
about the importance of not just listing historical facts,
Right.
but understanding the motivations and fears of the people who lived through those times.
Exactly.
We can learn so much from these glimpses into the past.
Again.
And often it's the unexpected details,
Yeah.
like a chicken pestilence, that bring those experiences to life.
They do.
So while the kings were battling for power, negotiating alliances, the people were contending with everyday challenges, from war taxes to diseased poultry. It makes you realize that history isn't just about the big players.
No.
It's about the resilience of the human spirit in the face of hardship on every level.
Absolutely.
And those themes of resilience and adaptation are evident in another fascinating figure we haven't discussed yet.
Okay.
William Bullock.
Oh, yeah?
Gordon describes him as a shrewd operator who managed finances for both Edward Balliol and later David II.
That's right.
Talk about playing both sides.
He did.
What can his story tell us about the nature of power and loyalty in this period?
Yeah, I think that's a great question.
Sounds like William Bullock was a bit of a chameleon.
Oh, yeah.
Adapting to whoever held the reins of power.
Mm-hmm.
Makes you wonder if it was more about survival
than
genuine loyalty for some people during these turbulent times.
You have to remember that power was constantly shifting in 14th century Scotland.
Right.
Allegiances could change overnight.
Yeah.
And those who wanted to survive had to be flexible, maybe even a little ruthless.
Okay.
And Bullock's story definitely captures that sense of opportunism.
Right.
But, like many who played this dangerous game, his luck eventually ran out.
What happened?
Cron. Forden tells us that he was accused of treason.
Wow.
And imprisoned.
That's rough.
It seems even the most cunning couldn't always stay one step ahead.
Yeah, sometimes you get caught up in the game.
You do.
And speaking of turning tides, let's revisit that dramatic moment in 1367. When David II revokes all those previous land grants. That must have sent shockwaves.
Oh, absolutely.
Through the Scottish nobility.
Imagine being a powerful lord.
Right.
Accustomed to all the privileges of your land holdings. And suddenly the king's taking it all back.
Yeah.
This wasn't just about refilling the royal coffers after David's ransom.
Right.
It was a bold power play.
Okay.
To reassert his authority after years of turmoil and captivity.
So he's coming back from England.
Yeah.
Not as a defeated prisoner.
No.
But as a king determined to reclaim control.
Exactly.
It seems like a risky move, though.
It was.
I mean, alienating powerful nobles could have easily backfired.
Well, it was a gamble, for sure.
Okay.
But it was a calculated one.
How so?
David II understood that a fragmented kingdom, with nobles holding significant power, would be vulnerable to internal strife and English manipulation.
Okay.
By reclaiming those land grants, he was consolidating his power.
Right.
And really laying the groundwork for a more unified and resilient Scotland.
It seems like we've uncovered a recurring theme here.
Yeah, what's that?
That constant struggle to balance individual ambition with the need for a united front against external threats.
That tension runs through all of these sources.
He does.
From Robert I facing those conspiracies within his own ranks, to David II navigating those treacherous waters of alliances and betrayals.
Yeah.
The fight for Scotland's survival was never straightforward.
So as we step back from all these fascinating details, what stands out to you as the most important takeaway from this deep dive?
I think it's that reminder that history is not just a series of dates and battles, but a tapestry woven from individual stories.
I like that.
Yeah, we've encountered kings and nobles, cunning financiers, everyday people facing all these hardships.
Yeah.
Their motivations, fears, and choices ultimately shape Scotland's destiny.
And what's amazing is how these centuries-old sources can still make us question our assumptions about the past.
That's true.
You know, we often think of medieval Scotland as this place defined by just violence and chaos.
Right.
But we've also seen ingenuity, resilience.
Yeah.
Even these moments of dark humor amidst all the struggles.
Oh, it's those human touches that make history come alive.
It does.
Who would have thought that a seemingly insignificant detail, like a chicken pestilence, could reveal so much about the challenges of daily life?
Yeah.
Or that the story of this double-dealing Chamberlain could offer such insights into the nature of power.
You know, it just goes to show that there's always more to uncover.
Oh, yeah.
More layers to explore, even in the most familiar historical narratives.
Absolutely.
So for our listeners out there, I encourage you to keep digging, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into this fascinating world of history.
You never know what you'll find.
Who knows what hidden gems you might find?
Perhaps you'll discover the secret to William Bullock's success.
Maybe.
Or maybe you'll track down that medieval salmon recipe. The possibilities are endless.
They are.
But most importantly, keep an eye out for those seemingly insignificant details.
Okay.
They often hold the key to unlocking a deeper understanding of the past.
Well said. And with that, we'll bring this deep dive to a close.
I enjoyed it.
Me too.
Yeah.
Until next time, happy exploring.
Happy exploring.